My name's Sean Gilfillan from Automotive Magic in New Jersey, and we're on the line here with Chris Lawson, who's going to be taking us through the Profit First presentation today. He's a sought-after author, speaker, and digital strategist, the founder of Astute Social Media. Chris helps truck shops and auto shops get their search engine optimization, Google Ads, and all their digital marketing handled so they can get back to growing their business. He's also a featured speaker for regional national industry conference and trade shows, including Shop Management Alliance, Independent Truck Repair Group, showing attendees how to build and maintain 5-star reputations, finding high-quality employees on Facebook, and help get their shops found online through Google Ads and search engine optimization to generate consistent flow of new customers. Most recently, Chris has leveraged his previous 25 years career in the financial service industry to help auto and truck repair shops improve their profitability as certified Profit First consultant. So here's our first webinar. We're at least getting it rolling here. We got 19 people on the call so far, so let's kick it off and get rolling. Chris?
All right. Thanks, Sean. For those of you who are not part of Shop Management Alliance, I just wanted to let you know who we are at Shop Management Alliance. We're in a network of successful automotive and truck and trailer repair shop owners and industry professionals who have come together to improve the management of their businesses through education, networking, consulting, and industry-specific 20 groups. So today, what we thought we wanted to do is just have a webinar and really start getting into one of the issues that's affecting all of us right now. So, you know, I don't need to tell you what's going on out there. I mean, we all see it in our businesses, and we all see it in the news, and we all see it everywhere in our neighborhoods and our communities. What we thought would be a really effective way to take a real proactive stance to this is to dive in and take a look at expenses and do that from the Profit First perspective. So one of the things that I've been working through in terms of getting my certification in the Profit First methodology, and if you're not familiar with Profit First, I highly recommend the book. It's by a gentleman named Mike Michalowicz, and it is a cash management system for building strong, profitable foundations on your small business. And that's what this presentation is all about. It's about what we can do proactively to make our businesses stronger and come out of this little dip in the market stronger than ever. I can guarantee you that there are a lot of shops out there that aren't proactively taking the steps that they need in order to become stronger in this environment. There are a lot of businesses in general who are not going to come out of this stronger. So we're going to take those steps, and we're going to move forward. So what I'd like to do is actually get into the presentation here. And if you do have any questions, Sean is going to be my co-pilot here on this webinar. This is again interactive. And I'm going to kind of skip through some of the parts that aren't as interactive so that we can get right down into the meat of it. But if you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to ask those as we go, because this is going to be, this is a workshop. This will be interactive. One of the things that Profit First is doing is every day Mike Michalowicz is jumping on and he's giving resources and tools to help people that are running businesses and that are in crisis mode in their businesses. And one of the things that is a model that he uses is the business crisis trend. And stage one of any type of business crisis is always the shock. So it is when you get startled, you freeze up, you're like a deer in the headlights, and it's like, okay, which way am I going to go? And each one of these stages has particular areas where you can take the wrong turn and you can go off into business collapse. So you can see those are the arrows that point down. So when you get into shock and you freeze up, there can be a tendency for inaction, so not doing anything. And then when you get into the desperation stage, then that's where big wrong actions can happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but you want to make sure that you're not getting into that situation. And then the next stage, stage 3, is evaluation. That's when calmer heads prevail. That's where the initial emotion and the fear of the crisis starts to subside. And the thinking starts coming more from the rational brain and less from the emotional brain. So we're kind of using our emotional intelligence and we're making more rational decisions. That's when the upward swing starts in, and then deliberate action starts in. That's when we're more strategic. We start to rebound. There's still a danger that small recurring wrong actions can happen. When that happens, then that can also take business into collapse. But once you build that momentum into the surge and the burst, that's where preparedness meets opportunity. So you've heard the saying, luck is where preparedness meets opportunity. Well, right now is a chance for us to really get prepared and to start taking the steps that we need to in order to grow. So the second model that they use quite a bit in Profit First is not falling for the survival trap. Point A is where the crisis happens. That's where the center circle is. And what the tendency is as business owners, we're very proactive. We like to jump in, we like to solve problems, we like to take action. And when we're uncomfortable, the tendency is to take any action, because any action will take us away from the way that we feel currently. But that's not what we want to do. We need to make sure that we're having calmer heads prevail, and we want to make sure that the actions that we take are leading us to our ideal scene. So there are lots of different actions that we can take to get us out of pain. We can take on an unfit project to cover this month's payroll. We can, focus all efforts on something that is short term. We can think about offering new products. We can do all these different types of things. But in the end of the day, what we really want to do is we want to take action that's going to lead us to the point B. What is point B? Point B is our ideal vision. Where do you want your shop to be 5 years out in the future? Where do you want your shop to be 10 years out in the future? Are you going to be selling? Is there a specific revenue target? Is there a specific profitability target? Is there a specific growth target? Employees? Community impact? That's where we want to start from. So today, what we're talking about when we're talking about going through and looking at expenses, tightening up the P&L, cutting out the fat, when we're talking about making your business stronger and more profitable, that's what we're doing it for. We don't want to look at knee-jerk reactions that take us away from the pain. We want to look at building in a manner that is going to take us more towards the ideal vision. So what are business buyers looking for? So one of the interesting things that happened with on a Profit First call on Monday, we had our global call. So everybody from around the world gets on this global call. And they had a business broker, very successful business broker. And they were asking him questions about what he looks for in a business when they're going in and he is working with purchasers of a business. And he said, here's what purchasers of the business are looking for. They're looking to minimize risk. So why is this important? Well, structuring your business in a way that minimizes risk in the eyes of a purchaser just so happens to be the best way to run a business most profitably and effectively in your life. So what are the things that you do? Well, they're looking at what is the seller's involvement? How critical are they to the business viability? So if the seller walks away, does the business collapse? Is there a recurring revenue that happens consistently? Is there a documented system in place that shows how that revenue and profit were derived? And he mentioned that 80 to 90% of small businesses, the answer is no. There is no documented system in place. And then how is the owner paying themselves? Is it clear or is it hidden in the different areas in the P&L? And we're going to talk about that quite a bit in a few slides. And are the financials in shape? Do they make sense? Can you see a clear flow? So what you see from this, and the reason why I put this slide in here is it's because it's very relevant to what's going on right now. When things are slow, it gives us the opportunity to focus on some of these other areas. So it gives us an opportunity to focus on downloading some of the knowledge that's inside of your head. I mean, I know a lot of the folks on this call have, 10, 20, 30 years of experience in this industry. And there's a lot of stuff in your head. And when somebody comes in to purchase your shop, they're not going to purchase what's in your head, basically. They're going to purchase what you've extrapolated out of your head and have gotten down into documented systems and procedures. Now, if we're slow, it's a good time to get some of those procedures documented. It's a good time to go back through, trim those expenses, and get things in shape so that your business is looking good. So I'm going to go over this one real quick, but this is important because spending is emotional. whenever we start talking about cutting things, we start getting emotional. And I used to talk about this all the time when I gave presentations in the financial services industry. People would sit down and they would say, okay, well, we're having these challenges or these issues here. And what really became apparent to me, and what we used to say in the industry, is money's not math, money is emotion. And it sounds funny, but just think about it. How much of spending is emotional? And think about this example. So if there's a bunch of donuts sitting in the, bunch of donuts sitting in the break room, and there is one donut left, and you go in and you grab the last donut, it makes you feel kind of good, right? But what happens if somebody else grabs the last donut? You kind of end up thinking about that all day long, right? It's the difference between losing something and winning something. And people will work harder to avoid losing something than they will to gain it. And that's what we have to think about, because as much of what Profit First does is it creates a structure that is behaviorally based. So accountants have been, my accountant, my bookkeeper, they've been writing me for years, you need to be managing your business by the numbers. You need to be looking at your financials. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. And what Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First, so astutely observed is that business owners and entrepreneurs are going to behave the way they behave. It's going to be very difficult. Some of them are good at it and some of them can do it, but not everybody is going to want to learn how to read their financials and operate their business exclusively from their financials. And that's why, looking at cutting expenses, we want to shift that a little bit. And we want to make that an exercise that's not so much about losing something as it is about gaining something else. So that's what we're going to talk about in getting into it. So here's what one of our Shop Management Alliance members said about the expense exercise. The exercise of pulling all the expenses opens your eyes. You see stuff that gets buried and you forget about. So this is really important, because think about it. When's the last time you sat down, went through all of your expenses, and assigned an importance to them? For some, they do it monthly. For some, it's quarterly. For some, it is annually. And sometimes folks just don't get around to it at all. So this should be a regular exercise that you go through, because a lot of stuff starts piling up. It's like the garage. A lot of stuff starts piling up, and you don't even know it's in there until you really pull it out and take a look at it and remember why you purchased it in the first place and why it's still there. So here's something that I want you to think about as we're going through this process. So this guy, not a lot of people know who this guy is. If you were in Burbank, you'll know who this guy is, because I mentioned him there. But this gentleman's name is Graham Hart. He's the richest man in New Zealand. And you're all familiar, I'm sure, with the show The Profit. Well, this guy's net worth is 10 times that of Marcus Lemonis, who's the star of The Profit. And he basically does the same thing that Marcus Lemonis does. He goes in and he's a turnaround expert, and but he does huge scale leverage buyouts of distressed assets. So what he does is he goes in, he finds businesses that are hurting, he takes a stake in them, and then he turns them around for a profit. And one of the core things that really interested me about Graham Hart is his methodology and his process. What he does when he goes into a business is he immediately stops all spending. All spending comes through him. So all the invoices, he shuts off the credit cards, the checkbook is in his control, and anybody that wants to spend anything has to come to him. And he tells this story about how one day somebody came to him with an invoice for $250,000 and said, yeah, we need to pay this invoice. And so he asked this person, he said, well, what's the invoice for? And the person said, oh, this is a giraffe that we sponsor for the local zoo. And, you can imagine the look on his face. He's, here we are with this business, it's about to go under, and we're about to spend $250,000 on a giraffe at the local zoo. And it turns out that this business had been sponsoring this giraffe for over 10 years. So the point of all this is there's a giraffe somewhere in your business, and we want to find it and we want to eliminate it. So step one, hopefully most of you had the opportunity to go in and to pull your P&Ls. And then your P&L should also have the percentage of revenue for each one of the expenses. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through this process and we're going to look at each one of the categories, but we're going to do it in a specific way. We're going to do it in a way where it takes some of the emotional sting out of it. And this is how we're going to do that. So with Profit First, if you're not familiar with how Profit First works, what Profit First has done is Mike Michalowicz and his team of Profit First professionals, they've at this point worked with over 10,000 businesses. And what they found is that there are certain ratios and there are certain ways that successful businesses spend their money and invest their money. And what they've done is they've broken up those different categories into different segments, and it's basically bands. They're bands of sales. So you can see A is between 0 and 250K, B is between 250K and 500K, C 500 to a million, D million to 5 million, E 5 million to 10 million, and F 10 million to 50 million. So Profit First is really for small businesses. So they're not really, we're not really dealing with a bunch of businesses that are over $50 million in sales. But one important thing to remind you of here is that we're talking about real revenue. Now for repair shops, we're talking about subtracting out your materials and subcontractors, which basically equates to your parts sales. So taking your gross revenue and then subtracting out your parts sales. Don't get this confused with your cost of goods sold, because that's not, cost of goods sold is not what we're talking about when we're talking about materials and subcontractors. Those are two different things. So just subtract out your parts from your top line number, and that gives you your real revenue. Real revenue is what we look at in Profit First as the money that you are using to operate your business. That's really what the money that is coming in, because essentially what happens with your parts revenue is you're just basically taking money in and then you're handing it back out to the vendors and you're taking a small markup. What we're basing all of our Profit First numbers on is we're basing those numbers based on the real revenue. From real revenue, we then calculate your profit, your owner's pay, what you take home, your taxes, and your operating expenses. Today, our focus is on operating expenses. So if you, right now, take a look at your P&L, look at your top line number, subtract out your parts sales, and then look at where your real revenue falls. So for example, if it falls in the $1 million to $5 million area, then you will want to look at column D, go all the way down to column D, and 65% is your operating expenses. So once we have this, we can move on to the next step. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to try to monitor the chat as well so that I can answer those questions. And Sean, you can let me know if I miss any of those questions.
Yep, I haven't seen any pop up yet.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're reverse engineering. That's what we're doing. So what I do is when I'm going through the Profit First apprenticeship program and I'm looking at these, I'm actually keeping a spreadsheet, and it's a real simple exercise. You just create just a very simple spreadsheet, and what I do is we go through the P&L, we look at all of the expenses, and then we mark each one of those expenses. And I'm going to show you how we do that. We mark each one of those expenses with a letter. P is for profit. So this particular line item on the P&L produces a profit. The next line item is replace. So R, replace, means, okay, what can we do? Is there a way that we can, this is something that it needs to be done, it needs to happen, it needs to be invested in, but is there a suitable replacement that is less expensive? Can we swap this out? Is there something that we can do to reduce the cost of this? And then the next line item is unnecessary. So what this means is this something that doesn't directly contribute to the profitability of the business? And the way that we look at that is we get very technical, because again, we don't want to get pulled back into emotion, because emotion says, oh, let's just hang on to it and we'll just take care of it later. We want to get out of the emotion of this and we want to get back into the logic of this. And what the logic of this is that we want to make sure that we use the P&L to identify which expenses are absolutely necessary to maintain the standard of service or a quality of product for our business. So that's a good question to ask as you're going through. So yes, is this a profitable piece? Is this something that we have to invest in order to maintain the quality of service? Is it absolutely necessary? Or can we do without it? You know, is this something that's nice to have? Or is this something that would really significantly impact the quality of our service to our customers if we cut it out of our spending? So let's keep this at that level. Let's try not to get this into emotion, because emotion just says, okay, I don't want to cut this, and it ends up being left. So after we've gone through the entire P&L once, take a look at it. And what I was going to do is, since we're running behind, I'm not going to allot for a lot of time behind there, because I want to get into some of the other strategies and mindsets. But this is something that you can do, is go through and mark everything with a P, an R, or a U. And then I keep a running total in the spreadsheet. And if something is a P, then I just take that line item and I add it to the running total. So I do it in a spreadsheet, and Excel just does it automatically. Once you get to the point, and this is going to happen, once you get to the point where you have bumped up against where your expenses should be, according to this slide. So for example, let's say you're between $1 and $5 million in real revenue. Once you get your totals, all of your P's add up to 65%. Then all of a sudden, what we have to do is we've got to do something called ringing the towel. So you're bumping up against the total amount that you have available allotted towards your operating expenses. So ringing the towel means, okay, let's look at all these expenses that we have designated as being critical and profit-centered, or that we just can't cut. And if we cut any more of those expenses, it would impact significantly the quality of the service that we're providing. So this is where you start to call and negotiate on each one of those. So is there a way that we can cut the expenses? I know right now, we've talked about this a lot on the Shop Management Alliance calls. There are vendors who are actually giving discounts and free months right now because of what we're going through with the whole COVID-19 situation. This is a great opportunity to revisit that. It's a great opportunity to revisit any long-term outstanding debts. It's a good time to revisit any type of subscriptions, software, all that kind of stuff. That's how we can ring the towel. We want to explore other options. Are there ways that we can replace something that we're doing for a less expensive option? Let's confirm that there's no overlap. Do you have software? Software is just, that is a perfect example of where there may be some overlap. Are there marketing expenses where there's an overlap? Are you paying for duplicate services? I mean, is your website vendor doing the same thing as your, somebody that's doing marketing for you? Is there overlap there? These are all areas that we want to look at so that we can wring the towel, so to speak, and squeeze every additional penny out of those expenses. We also want to create systems to track and verify daily investments. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, particularly on the marketing side, because one of the biggest black holes that we see, that I've seen in my work in looking at these balance sheets for shops, and from talking with other professionals who work exclusively with auto and heavy duty and truck repair shops, is marketing tends to be a gigantic black hole where a lot of money goes into it, but it's murky. We don't know where that money is going. So we're going to talk a lot about that. So after you wring the towel, then what we want to do is we want to come back in and look at where we are. So we want to look at, okay, we wrung the towel. How much did we cut out? How close are we to that target allocation percentage, the ideal target allocation percentage? And now, if there are other things that need to be added back in, let's add those back in. And can we operate and provide a consistent, valuable product and a consistent, valuable result, quality result to our customers at that level of expenses? So what usually happens at this point in working with this process is, hey, there's no way that we can squeeze all the way down to that particular level of OpEx. And that's okay. What we typically find in Profit First is that if you do this exercise diligently, you can cut between 10 and 25% out of your expenses. And that 10 to 25% can be reallocated towards the other areas. So your tax account, your owner's pay, towards your profit, other areas. But if you can't get all the way there, that's fine. What we do in Profit First is we actually do something called a rollout plan, where we incrementally reduce your operating expenses and increase allocations to other areas. So it's not like you have to, take a cold shower, so to speak, and get all these cut out right away. You can do it incrementally. But the exercise of this process is it disciplines you into making those tough choices and really honing this down and making sure that you are you've got really lean financials and operations. Okay, so at this point, I just want to see again if anybody has any questions, because I'm going to go into some advanced strategies and some advanced mindsets to think about as you're going through this process to help you to really even increase or enhance the performance of this whole process. No questions? Okay.
Chris, there's just one thing that I wanted to clarify too that
Yes.
I may have been a misunderstood. When you were saying to subtract out your parts sales, you're talking about the cost of the parts itself, right? Not what you sell them for?
Cost of the parts, yes. Thank you for clarifying. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Sean. Yep.
Just the cost of that and the cost of your sublets.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And that gives us the real revenue. Sure. And one of the things that the business broker talked about, and this fits right in with that, is the misconception of business value. So, there's always, almost always a misconception of the true value of a business in the business owner's eyes, because, we see our businesses in one way, and then potential purchasers see it in a different way. But what Profit First seeks to do is it seeks to present your business in a manner that is very objective. So we can say, oh yeah, well we have, the business that does X number of revenue, but if, a certain huge percentage of that is getting siphoned off and going to a certain area, really we don't have a business that's generating that amount of revenue. We have a business that's generating much less revenue. So we're just trying to create an accurate picture of what revenue the business is actually generating. Okay. So let me move forward here and get into one of the areas that we see is being a sticky area, accounts receivable. So if there are accounts receivable issues, that is something that I just wanted to share a resource, because I've seen that this can be a problem. One of my clients found this particular program, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but partial.ly is the website, and what they allow you to do is to create custom payment plans, and that's kind of cool. But what I thought was really interesting was that second image, and that second image, it actually integrates with QuickBooks. And if you have some problem outstanding accounts receivable, what you can do is you can actually go right into QuickBooks and you can send out a request for the individual to create a payment plan. So they can create their own payment plan. And you can set up the parameters of it, but this client of mine, what he did was he had a bunch of outstanding receivables and he just couldn't collect on them. So he installed this program and then it went into QuickBooks and then he sent out a bunch of these and people, they were receptive to it. They were receptive to it. They knew that they owed it. They knew it was outstanding and it was flexible enough that it got them started. And I thought this was just an amazing program. I'd never seen it before, but if it works for you, I highly recommend you check it out, partial.ly, and it may be a way that you can collect on some of those outstanding receivables. So we always like to talk about where the benefits, the owner benefits that are paid for the business are. And with Profit First, our goal with the assessment is to see how that owners are being compensated versus what the business actually needs to succeed. And the more clearly that we can see what the business needs to function, the better. And that's what Profit First is all about, is figuring out, it's separating everything out so we can see in each specific area how much is being spent. And that way we can do, at just a glance, we can analyze the health of the business. And it makes it very easy. And it makes it easier than really going through all the financials. A good accounting professional, a good bookkeeping professional, they read the financials like they read a magazine. They read it, they absorb it, they understand it, they know what the picture is, they know what it means, and they're quick at doing it. For business owners, the shortcut, so to speak, is to be able to look at the accounts. And that's what Profit First, why Profit First was set up the way it was set up. Is just a glance at your accounts, you have your finger on the pulse of what your business is doing. You can see that your expenses are covered. You can see that your personal income is covered. You can see that your taxes are covered. You can see whatever else needs to happen on a regular basis. You can see, because of the balances in the account, that it's covered. That gives you the peace of mind to be able to go back in and then start doing what you need to do, and you don't have to worry about the cash flow. That's really what Profit First is about. So what we want to do is, unless there is a real significant tax benefit from having the business pay for, specific items, like healthcare, so to speak, meals, vacations, vehicles, all the common owner perks that are paid through the business, these are things that we want to take a look at. And we want to really identify, because it's going to, these are the areas that become vague, and we want to make sure that we can clarify those. So our goal in Profit First is to create a stable income so that the personal life can support the perks and that you don't have to ideally run those through the business. So I hope you can see this. I put together a mind map. And this mind map are the typical areas where I've seen that there are owner benefits that are paid by the business. So this is a great area to focus on if you're looking at cutting expenses, particularly when you're going through lean times and you're looking for those areas that can be cut very quickly. So, you can take a screenshot of this. I won't go through each one of these one by one. If there are any specific questions, then we can answer those. But these are the areas that I've seen where those owner expenses can hide. And again, eventually, when you're going to sell your shop, you want to have these broken out, because this is going to be something that a potential purchaser is going to look at. They're going to be looking at, okay, well, what is the actual owner compensation, and what is the business actually pulling in, and how are the business financials actually functioning?
Yeah, Chris, and Sue had a question about depreciation, or just looking at cash flow. I think that's more of a deduction that helps you save some of that profit on taxes. We're not really in that direction, correct?
Exactly. Yep, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. One of the things that we do is we're doing everything on a cash basis with Profit First. So when we're looking at the statements, we're looking at everything on a cash basis for the statements. And, of course, depreciation is going to help you on the tax side. but we're really focused on cash flow and the cash management. But they're both important, absolutely. Okay. Any other questions?
So in other words, Chris, you're not we're not putting depreciation on our monthly income statement, correct?
Well, I've had spirited debates about this with bookkeepers. I say no, because here's the reality. The reality is, what makes it easiest for you to run your business? I mean, that's the reality. There's
Right.
there's an administrative part of this that's important, because your bookkeeper or your accountant is going to be, they're going to be doing your taxes. So it's important from their perspective. But for you, I mean, do you need to know where your depreciation is on a regular basis in order to run your business?
No.
And that's my point. My point is, let's streamline these things to the point where they don't get in the way, and they don't, when something's too complicated, we tend to put it off.
I agree with that, but the one thing I guess I'm caught up in then is, in terms of capturing all the expenses, and if you're looking at it from a cash flow point of view, then you do need to include that expense when you actually purchase a new piece of equipment. Otherwise, there's a whole big chunk you're missing. If you buy a new alignment rack, or the roof, you need a roof repair, where are you capturing that expense if you're not picking it up in depreciation?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. And what one of the things about Profit First is, we always talk about, one of the sayings is, when in doubt, create an account. So from a business owner's perspective, a business owner needs to know that there is the funds are there to service whatever debt is going to be there, or to purchase whatever capital improvements are going to be necessary. That's where the accounts come in. So ideally, there is an account that is specifically designated so that you can see at a glance that that expense is going to be taken care of.
But so that is not included in the op expense percentage, is that correct?
Well, here's the thing. It can be, or it doesn't have to be. So here's the short answer is, and here's where it gets sticky, is because I would say, if you want to make sure that you have that and you can see it, you just open up an account for it, and then you have the account and you can see it. But what I've had pushback from bookkeepers, because some bookkeepers will say, well, we know that it's part of that, and that's what, we know that it's part of that, and we don't want to create an additional account because that, creates additional work. Does that make sense?
All be done. Yeah, I mean, that can all be done offline. I get that, but it concerns me to be looking at these percentages if you're not capturing all the expenses. But that's a point. Every year that could be completely different if you're not using depreciation. I mean, you don't put a new roof on every year.
Right. Right. Yeah. And from an accounting perspective, this is really from the cash management perspective. So if having another account makes that easier, I would just say have the other account. I mean, it's not a big issue.
Okay.
To have an additional account. The main thing about this, and one of the things we always talk about in Profit First, is that not everybody's going to have the same set of accounts. I thought when I got into this certification program, I was just going to have, I was going to be able to go out and I was going to sit down with, a shop owner and say, okay, these are the accounts you need to go set up. So go set all these accounts up, and then we'll work through the process, and then I'll show you how this works. What I found out pretty quickly was not everybody needs the same accounts. And what it really comes down to is, what does the owner, or what do you as the the bookkeeper or the financial professional need to see on a regular basis in order to keep things running? A lot of times it's different for the bookkeeper than it is for the owner.
Correct.
The owner kind of just wants to know, okay, we've got cash where we need to have it, and it's going to be taken care of. And so the bookkeeper's thinking, okay, well, we need to think downstream, and we know these payments are outstanding, and we know, this is going on, and depreciation and all these other things. That's kind of a different perspective. The way that we look at it is, an owner, and this actually came up in our discussion in Burbank. I asked the room, how many of you check your bank balances once a month online? And then I said, how many of you check your bank balances once a week online? And then I said, how many of you check your bank balances every day online? And you know what the funny thing is, most of the room raised their hand when I said, how many of you check your bank balances every day? And you know what? That drives accounting professionals nuts. It drives them nuts when their owners are checking the bank balances every day online. But that's the reality.
Right.
So however we can make it simple enough so that the business owner can go in, they can see their bank balances, they can know that they're going to be okay, they can know that they've got money that they need to have for each one of those expenses, and they can do it in 15 seconds, that's really what we're going for.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, hopefully I clarified that.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. So let's keep moving through this. Here's a quote by John Wanamaker. Not everybody knows who John Wanamaker is, but he says, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. John Wanamaker was he's an American merchant. He actually started the first chain of stores that later became Macy's. So he was a pretty successful guy, and he was one of the pioneers in marketing and really figuring out how to market a retail business effectively. And, you know, this is where a lot of problems come in. So as I'm out talking with other, profit first professionals who work with repair shops, they say, you know what, I ask every one of them, I say, okay, well, where do you see the common problems that happen over and over again? Or where do you see where the most money is wasted? And they say, you know what, without a doubt, it's on the marketing side. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that there are some things that are set up on the marketing side. One, we want to go through point by point on every one of the marketing expenses, and we want to ask a couple of questions. We want to ask, one question is, what is the ROI on this item? Do we know what the ROI is on this? Did we generate something on this? That's a big one. Another one is, if you're taking on any new marketing initiatives, we want to ask, how will we measure the effectiveness of this? Are we going to mark, for example, if this is, Google Ads, is there going to be a form on our, on our invoices that we mark, on our bills that we mark that says, okay, this customer came in through Google Ads. Are we going to do that at our point of service software? Are we going to track all this stuff so that we can make sure that we can attribute every new customer to a specific marketing avenue? These are important questions to ask. And then how are we going to measure that this has been successful? If we start investing in something today, next quarter, can we come back and look at it and say, okay, well, we paid this radio station X number of dollars. Was it successful? And the problem is, most of the time when you ask that question for specific marketing line items, we have no idea. So having systems in place to be able to manage those effectively is very important. And the other thing is having a system in place to monitor it before it becomes an investment. So having a gatekeeper, so to speak. I was speaking with one of my colleagues, one of my Profit First professional colleagues. She's been a bookkeeper for 40 years, and she's been working with all different types of businesses, and she works with a lot of auto repair shops. And she said, you know what? We go through all of the marketing, and then she said, I tell them they can't add anything to marketing unless they call me. So she's the gatekeeper. She says, I know you guys get hit by people every week. You come in, somebody's got a new bells, new whistles, new marketing, proposals, all this kind of stuff. She says, send it to me. We'll figure out exactly how it fits in. We'll figure out what we want to do to monitor it. We'll figure out what, how we're going to assess if this is successful or not. And we're going to figure out how to track it before we even invest any money in this. And that's the type of system that you want to have ultimately in place, so that you know that your marketing dollars are being spent on the right thing. The next piece of this is the Pareto principle. And I know this is going to make Nick happy because Nick loves the Pareto principle. We talk about this all the time in the Shop Management Alliance. And the Pareto principle, and the Pareto principle is very applicable to your marketing expenses. It's applicable to everything in your business if you really look hard enough, but marketing particularly. And I have just been amazed. I mean, I've known about the Pareto principle for a couple decades, maybe even 3 decades, but it just always still amazes me. It just tickles me to see how it applies in so many different areas. Try this. Go through your marketing expenses, look at the returns that are being generated by each line item. So if you break it out and you're spending money for SEO, you're spending money for that search engine optimization, you're spending money for Google ads or Facebook ads or radio ads or whatever you're spending money for in mailers, flyers, that kind of thing. Just look at it and break it out and look at it as a percentage. And this is why I wanted you to print out your P&Ls by percentage, is so you can see some of these things, but you're also going to want to get more granular and break out the existing the categories too. And just add them up and see how much you spend on each one of those areas. And then look at what results you can attribute directly to each one of those line items. And see if you can't find an 80-20 relationship in there somewhere. And I've seen it. And it's amazing, and I've seen it. You can see the top 20% of the marketing dollars that you're spending and how they're generating 80% of the results that you are getting from your marketing. And once you identify that, see how you can enhance that. Is there a way that you can allocate some of that 80% that you are not allocating towards that 20% that is giving you the best return? Can you reallocate? Can you cut some of those things on the 80%? Can you make that 20% even more effective? So for example, if one of the most effective things that you do are, mailers, can you make that more effective? Can you invest a little bit in copywriting to make them make the conversion rates go up a little bit? Can you, instead of sending it out to everybody in a specific area, can you just send that out to somebody who would be a more targeted buyer, or to your existing customers? So it can reduce the cost of those mailers, but increase the conversions. This is an area where you can make a huge impact very quickly, is on your marketing budget. And now is really the time to do that. I've mentioned a lot on our calls, on our Shop Management Alliance calls, the owners' calls, about how cheap online advertising is right now, comparatively. And now's the time where you can really make a big impact. If it turns out that there are certain online avenues for you that are generating returns, you can kind of double down on those right now and really increase the returns and your results. Any questions on marketing before we move on? Okay, let's move on to your labor and building a leaner team. So, this is, we're talking about employees now, and this is, this can be a sensitive subject, but PRU applies here too. So, profit. Who are the profit centers? I mean, there are specific positions, as we all know, that are profit center positions. There are positions that are supportive positions. But even more than the specific position is the specific person. Are these people really good at their roles? Do you have defined roles for each one of those positions, and what makes a superstar in each one of those positions? If we know what makes a superstar in those positions and how they contribute to overall team profitability, then we also can look at, okay, how is this person living up to that? Then we can start making decisions of, okay, well, here's a list of employees. This person's a P, this person's an R, this person's a U. And at times like these, getting lean with the team is also important as well. And this is just a quick story. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at 12:30. I'm going to wrap this up in just a couple of minutes. So I just want to let everybody know that we're almost done, and then we'll just do Q&A. As long as you'd like to stay around, I'm happy to answer questions. Just One More Day is a story, and I actually got this story from Mike Michalowicz. He told this story. He said he had one of his clients who's a business owner, and he flew out to see him, and they were going to hang out for a week. And when he first got there and he picked him up from the airport, the business owner said, "Oh, you know what? I want to run by Home Depot because I've got to look at some electrical equipment." So they went by Home Depot on his way back from the airport, and they looked at the electrical equipment, and he said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I need." And so Mike Michalowicz said, "So are you going to buy it?" He said, No, I'm just going to wait one more day. And she says, "Oh, okay, no problem." So they just went about their thing. They did their thing. They hung out for the week, and every time they drove by Home Depot, Mike would ask him, "Hey, you going to go in there and pick up that stuff?" And the guy says, "Nah, just one more day." And then, this happened the whole week. And then it came time for Mike to leave, so his friend was taking him back to the airport, and they drove by the Home Depot again, and he says, "Hey, you going to go pick up that stuff?" He says, "Nah, one more day." And he laughed. He said, "Well, what's this whole one more day thing?" And he says, "Anytime I have a big expense, I just tell myself one more day, and I see how much pain I can endure until I buy it." And he said, what happens most of the time? What happens most of the time is I figure out a way around it, or I figure out why I don't need it. But then if I really start experiencing the pain from it, and the pain is intense enough, then I'll go ahead and I'll make the purchase. And he said that one idea has saved me millions of dollars over my life in just saying one more day. So from an expense perspective, again, we think of this as logical, but so much of this is emotional. And, if the one more day technique can help you on the emotional side, we used to do this on the, on the personal finance side too. And Dave Ramsey talks a lot about this. He's like, if you really want something, wait 48 hours. You won't want it as bad anymore. So just putting those big purchases off can make a dramatic impact on your profitability and your expenses. And then staying vigilant. So, I just want to, kind of leave you with this. Accountability and consistency are really important. So having that accountability in place, if you need to have somebody, if you like to spend money on marketing, having that your marketing czar in place that you run your expenses by, and really think about all of the expenses before they get incurred. Setting up the marketing and monitoring approval system would be important for you. Planning your expense audit days. Do you have specific days that you go in and do your expense audits? Is it quarterly? Is it annual? Those are important. Put a pin in the calendar and make sure that those happen on a consistent basis. Pulling that information out and looking at it is important, but you have to make sure that you're doing that on a consistent basis, or it just it goes at the back of your mind and you just forget about it. So with that, I just want to open it up to questions and see if you needed any clarification on any specific items here. No questions? Okay. Well, I am going to let everybody get back to your busy days. If you are on this call and you're not familiar with the Shop Management Alliance, why don't we've got Nick Rakonen here would be happy to help you out. He's Nick at shopmanagementalliance.com. We also have Sean Gilfillan, who is my co-pilot here on this call. He's at Sean at shopmanagementalliance.com. And he can help you out. And if you have any specific questions about Profit First or anything that we talked about on this presentation, you can contact me. I'm Chris at shopmanagementalliance.com. And we've also got one more person here from Shop Management Alliance, I believe Robert Archer is Robert at shopmanagementalliance.com. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or go over these items in additional detail.
Great. This is Nick from Shop Management Alliance. Feel free to check our website. It's called www.shopmanagementalliance.com. And feel free to contact us for any questions you have. It's great to have you here.
Yes. Thank you all for sticking around. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Chris, thank you.
Sure. Have a great afternoon.